how I dated an NFL player and he cheated on me. I never thought I'd be one of those people with a story that sounds like a tabloid headline. You know the ones. NFL player caught cheating on girlfriend, or star athlete's secret life exposed. Those stories always seem so far from my reality. Just the kind of things that happened to people who lived in a different world, in the glossy pages of celebrity gossip magazines. Yet, here I am, telling my own version of a story I never imagined would be mine. It's strange how life can shift in an instant. 1 minute, you're living in bliss, feeling on top of the world. And the next, the ground is crumbling beneath you. Looking back, there were signs, little red flags that I brushed aside. But in those early days, everything felt so perfect that I ignored them. I guess we all like to believe in the fairy tale, at least for a little while. We met at a charity gala. I was there because of my job. I do PR for a nonprofit and he was one of the celebrity guests. I remember not wanting to go that night. It had been a long week, and I just wasn't in the mood to be around a bunch of strangers, especially in a formal setting. But duty called, and there I was, standing awkwardly by the bar, trying to make small talk with donors and sponsors. That's when he walked in. To say he commanded the room would be an understatement. People turned their heads when he entered. He had that kind of presence, tall, broad-shouldered, with that effortless charm that some athletes seem to exude without even trying. I recognized him immediately. Of course, he wasn't just any NFL player. He was a star, the kind of player whose name gets mentioned in MVP conversations, the kind whose jersey is worn by thousands of fans on game day. I didn't think for a second that he'd notice me. Why would he? I was just another face in a sea of people vying for his attention. But somehow, as the night went on, our paths crossed. I don't remember exactly how it happened. Maybe it was a mutual acquaintance, or maybe he just wandered over to the bar where I was standing, but suddenly, we were talking. He was surprisingly down to earth, not at all like the larger-than-life persona I'd imagined. We chatted about everything but football, which felt refreshing, like he was more than just his career, more than just his fame. We exchanged numbers at the end of the night, but I didn't think much of it. I mean, what were the chances? He had a life full of glamour, travel, and the kind of people I'd only ever seen on TV. I figured I'd never hear from him again, but I did. A few days later, he texted me. It was a simple message, just asking how my week was going, but it was enough to start something. We texted back and forth for a while before he called me. That call turned into a nightly routine, where we'd talk for hours about everything: our childhoods, our dreams, our fears. He was funny, smart, and so much more thoughtful than I expected. I found myself falling for him faster than I ever thought possible. When we started dating, it felt like a whirlwind romance straight out of a movie. He'd fly me out to his games, set me up in the best hotels, and take me to dinners at the kind of restaurants I'd only ever dreamed of. And when the games were over, we'd slip into the post-game celebrations, mingling with his teammates, their partners, and occasionally, other celebrities. It was intoxicating. The glitz, the glamour, the excitement of it all. For a while, I was living in a world that felt too good to be true. And maybe that's because it was. In the beginning, everything was perfect. He was attentive, always making time for me despite his insane schedule. We'd go weeks without seeing each other because of his practices, games, and travel commitments. But he made up for it with phone calls and texts. He'd say things like, "I miss you so much," or "I can't wait to see you again." And I believed him. I believed that what we had was real, that I was the only woman in his life. But slowly, things started to change. At first, it was subtle. He became more guarded, especially with his phone. It was always face down, always in his pocket, even when we were just relaxing at home. I didn't think much of it after all. His life was chaotic, and I figured he just needed his privacy. But then, he started canceling plans at the last minute, claiming that team meetings ran late or that he was too tired after practice. There was one night that stands out, the night I really started to feel the shift. We were supposed to have dinner together after one of his games, something we'd been planning for weeks. I got all dressed up, excited to spend time with him, but just as I was about to leave, he texted me, "Can't make it. Team thing. Sorry." That was it. No explanation, no attempt to reschedule, just a brief, dismissive message that left me feeling like an afterthought. I tried to push the doubt aside, telling myself that it was just part of his demanding lifestyle. But the gnawing feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I started noticing other things, to how he'd pull away from me at public events, how he'd go out with his teammates after games and not invite me, how his social media posts featured everything but me. It was like he was living two lives, one with me, and one that I wasn't a part of. Then came the photo. I was sitting at home, scrolling through Instagram when I saw it. It was posted on some random gossip account, one of those pages that seems to exist solely to follow the lives of athletes and their entourages. There he was, at a nightclub I'd never heard of, standing way too close to a woman I didn't recognize. His arm was draped around her waist, and they were laughing, looking far too comfortable with each other. My heart stopped. I zoomed in on the picture, praying that I was wrong, but there was no mistaking it. That was him. That was my boyfriend. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My mind raced as I stared at the image, my chest tightening with each passing second. Was this real? Was this happening? I immediately texted him, asking where he was and what he was doing. Hours passed without a reply. The silence was deafening. I could feel my world crumbling, piece by piece. When he finally responded, he acted like nothing was wrong. He told me he'd been out with some teammates, that the girl in the picture was just a friend of a friend. He said I was overreacting, that I had nothing to worry about, but I wasn't buying it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that I was being lied to. The final blow came a few weeks later. I got a message from a girl I'd never met, a stranger. She sent me screenshots, texts between her and him, plans they'd made to meet up when he was in her city. I felt sick to my stomach as I scrolled through the messages, each one like a dagger to my heart. There was no denying it now. He'd been cheating on me, and God only knew for how long. Confronting him was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I was shaking when I called him, my voice barely steady as I asked him to explain himself. At first, he denied everything, said it was all just a misunderstanding. But when I told him about the screenshots, the messages from the other girl, he went silent. That silence said more than any words ever could. I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face. I felt broken, betrayed, like the rug had been ripped out from under me. The man I loved, the man I thought I knew, had been living a double life, and I'd been too blind to see it. In the weeks that followed, I went through every stage of grief, denial, anger, sadness, and eventually, acceptance. I cut him out of my life completely, blocked his number, and deleted every trace of him from my social media. It wasn't easy. There were days when I'd wake up and want to call him, to ask him why he'd done this, why he'd thrown away what we had. But I knew that no answer he gave me would ever be enough. The tabloids eventually got wind of the story, and for a while, my life became a spectacle for others to gawk at. An FL star caught in cheating scandal. The headlines read, I became the girl who got cheated on by a famous athlete. My pain reduced to a sensationalized story for people to read while waiting in line at the grocery store. But I'm more than that. I'm more than the woman who got her heart broken by an NFL player. I'm stronger now, wiser. I've learned that love isn't about the grand gestures, the fancy dinners, or the luxurious trips. It's about trust, respect, and honesty. And when those things are missing, no amount of fame or fortune can fill the void. So, here I am, telling my story, not for sympathy, but for closure. I loved him, yes, but I love myself more.